when I heard last October that they were going to do another reboot of Carrie, with all the tragedies recently, in particular the suicides related to recent bullying, if nothing else, I felt it was very, very bad timing. Because I wasn't sure how the creators were going to cover it. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that the Carrie storyline, regardless of how it's done, is anything but set in any particular time frame. And I will not deny that. Not for a minute. Let's just say that when I finally watched it a few days ago, the acting alone, the actors alone, they blew me away. Julianne Moore and Chloe Moretz, they were incredible. I could not believe they played their roles as convincingly as they did. Not to say that Piper Laurie and Sissy Spacek didn't do an incredible job themselves. Piper Laurie, I think, was pretty creepy and menacing, to say the least, as Margaret White. And Julianne Moore pretty much has that same gift. I was very, very impressed. The creators of this remake and the actors also did their homework. Even though they modernized the storyline, they did read the book before taking on the role, including, I think, Chloe and Julianne might have as well. But I was just very, very impressed with how careful they covered the material and not make a mockery of the suicides and recent bullying. That was one thing that I was afraid they were going to do. And they didn't do that. At all. And for that alone, good job, guys. I've had a problem with bullies, both directly and indirectly, most of my life. I never understood why they're an epidemic. An epidemic that we should have to just accept and deal with. The kids will be kids, boys will be boys. I mean, take your pick. The way things are going right now, it's getting to the point to where the epidemic's getting worse, and bullies are getting more persistent and crueler. And now that there's a social media out there, it's getting even harder to hide it. But I noticed that they did add a few scenes that were not in the original or even USA's remake from 2002. The Rage, Carrie 2, I thought it was okay, but to be honest with you, I kind of think the director would have been just as good off calling it The Rage without adding Carrie 2 to it, because for the most part it wasn't even a remake. Unless you count the backstory, or the new backstory behind Sue Snell's character. If you haven't seen it, you'll probably figure out what I'm talking about if you ever decide to watch it. This particular remake of Carrie, I was very impressed with the creators and what they came up with for the story. They did add a few new scenes to it that were not in the original version, which to me is okay, because when you remake a movie, you should not redo it scene for scene, word for word, cut for cut, all that other stuff. To me, when you do that, you might as well just leave it alone in the first place. But I also believe that even though if it's not broke, don't fix it. If a remake, even if a remake is successful, if they can do something different with it, they've certainly got my praise, and they've certainly got my vote for a thumbs up. I also think that they're going to keep redoing Carrie in one way or another. I know they are, because so far they haven't stopped. Do I think that there are other movies that may warrant the if it's not broke, don't fix it? Or if they can make it better, by all means do it? Absolutely. I also feel that there are some remakes that have actually, if they haven't improved on the original, they've made you want to see the original. which quite often does happen with me. But we'll get to those later. When it comes to originals and remakes, for the most part, once again, I'm pretty hard to disappoint. The only time I have a hard time with remakes is when they remake one that is, first of all, wasn't that good to begin with, and especially with comedies. I mean, who in their right mind wants to remake of a comedy? Just like the original remake of Footloose, because from what I've heard, it was almost a scene for scene, word for word recut of the original. I heard the same thing about the new Carrie, and for the most part, that is not what I got. Even despite Carrie's rampage in all three versions, you could empathize with where she was coming from. She had dreams for life and all that stuff, but, to say the least, she was tormented, and she got almost no support whatsoever from anybody. They saw her as an outcast, and she didn't know how to handle it. But by the time her power reached its peak, if anybody's seen The Rage Carrie 2, I think Sue Snell put it in a nutshell. The actress in the Sue Snell character in The Rage Carrie 2. If the game was something like what it was with the Snow Dome, and then it got out of control, the more I think about it, the more true that really is. Because as far as I can tell, when it comes to bullying, certain people, they can push, and they can push, and they can push, and they can push. But they only push you so far. But when it comes to things like that, you push someone hard enough, you may not like how they push back. You push them far enough, you may not like how they push back. And as for the retaliation, I don't think there's more into violence anymore than the other same person. But I gotta be honest. I do think there's a time where you have to stop running away, and you have to face what you're afraid of. Now, granted, there are those who don't agree with that either, and I respect that. But there are certain fights that you shouldn't run away from. Walking or running away should always be an option, but I've also seen how persistent certain bullies can be. Believe me when I tell you, I have. And to me, it's appalling how persistent certain bullies can be until they completely destroy their victims, sometimes to the point of self-destruction. And I have a big problem with that. On that note, I didn't see it in theaters because I was afraid it was going to be too intense, and it was going to hit too many hot topic buttons for me, in particular. And to be honest, there are certain movies that I'm probably better off not seeing in theaters for that very reason. Long story. On that note, check it out if you haven't already, but try to watch it with an open mind. And don't expect, and all I can tell you is, if you want to take it on its own merits, try not to do comparisons. That's all I can tell you. But check it out. You might be surprised. Thank you.